Hello there. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Tonight we are standing together on a sheet of ice that creaks softly beneath your boots, under a sky that looks like it has been scrubbed clean of color, where even the stars seem shy. You are wrapped in layers that smell faintly of wool, oil, and yesterday's steam from boiled snow. And in your mittened hands, you hold something absurdly delicate for a place like this. A postcard with a penguin printed on the front. The wind slides past your ears like a whispered warning, and somewhere in the distance, ice shifts with a sound like an old wooden ship sighing. You probably won't survive this journey if you packed emotionally light, because Antarctica has a way of freezing feelings solid and then handing them back to you when you least expect it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, maybe glance at your clock. Notice where you are in the world and drop your location and local time in the comments, because right now, you and I are sharing a strange little bubble of calm across continents. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You breathe slowly, and as you do, the postcard in your hand becomes heavier than it should be. It's just cardboard and ink, technically. But out here, in the early 20th century, when Antarctic explorers first began sending these tiny paper ambassadors home, a postcard was a miracle. A mainstream historical fact worth letting sink in is that expeditions like Robert Falcon Scott's Terra Nova expedition and Ernest Shackleton's Nimrod expedition regularly carried official postcards, sometimes pre-printed, sometimes custom-made, specifically so explorers could send a proof of life back to Europe. Imagine that. You risk frostbite, starvation, and getting lost in a white infinity. And one of your priorities is, yes, but can I mail something to Aunt Margaret? You turn the card over. The back is filled with cramped handwriting, every letter slightly shaky. Frozen fingers do that. Ink thickens, pens rebel, and yet people wrote anyway. All well, someone might scribble, even if their toes were numb and their tent was leaking. There's a gentle dishonesty in that, but also kindness. You don't tell your mother about the blizzard that nearly buried you. You tell her about the fine weather and the spirited penguins. Emotional customer service, Antarctic edition. Historians still argue whether these postcards were primarily emotional lifelines or subtle propaganda tools meant to reassure sponsors and governments. Were they love letters, or were they PR documents with stamps? Maybe both. Humans are very good at multitasking their feelings. You tuck the card into your coat for a moment and look around. The darkness here isn't empty. It's full. Full of wind, full of creaking ice, full of distant nasal penguin calls that sound suspiciously like grumpy old men arguing over parking spaces. And speaking of penguins, here's a quirky tidbit. Some early explorers genuinely believed penguins were curious enough to inspect human objects, and there are journal entries describing birds pecking at boots, cameras, and yes, sometimes postcards laid out to dry. No, they did not become official mail carriers. Sorry to disappoint. But the idea stuck, and later postcards often featured penguins as mascots of Antarctic mail, like tiny tuxedoed postal workers who never asked for overtime. You walk with the expedition members now. Second person present, boots crunching, breath fogging. They stop near a wooden hut, half buried in snow. Inside, it smells like damp wood, kerosene, and something that might once have been meat. On a rough table, stacks of postcards wait to be written. Some have photographs pasted on. Glaciers, ships locked in ice, men standing stiffly like overdressed scarecrows. Others are printed with patriotic slogans or expedition logos. This was logistics meeting comfort. In a place where everything wanted to kill you slowly, someone thought, let's make stationery. Cozy in the strangest way. It's like bringing throw pillows to a volcano. You sit down, metaphorically, next to a bearded explorer who is licking his pencil because the ink is frozen. Yes, that happened. Pens froze. Ink solidified. People warmed writing tools inside their clothes. One man reportedly slept with his pen to keep it usable. Romance is dead. Long live stationery. Another mainstream fact drifts into your awareness. Mail from Antarctica could take months, sometimes more than a year, to reach home. Postcards were often carried back by returning ships or relief expeditions. So when you wrote, you were writing to the future. You were writing to a version of your family that had already spent seasons worrying about you. Historians still argue whether this time delay intensified emotional bonds or weakened them. Did waiting a year for all well make love stronger, or did it make people numb? There is no spreadsheet for that. Only paper ghosts. You notice small jokes scribbled in margins. A tiny penguin doodle. A sarcastic, "still cold," with 3 exclamation points. That's joke number 1, by the way. Antarctic humor. Minimalism meets hypothermia. Outside, someone is boiling snow in a dented pot. Steam rises like a fragile dream. You hear someone complain that their socks are frozen into architectural forms. Joke number 2. Socks, now modern art. And then there's the third light joke drifting through the hut. If this postcard arrives, we're geniuses. If not, we're collector's items. Nervous laughter follows. They're joking about becoming museum exhibits. Casual. You pick up another card. This one has a photograph of the ship, trapped in ice like a bug in amber. It's beautiful and terrifying. Someone has written, "We remain optimistic." That phrase appears again and again in polar mail. Optimism was rationed, like food. A fringe tidbit slides in quietly. Some explorers believed that writing regularly helped maintain mental health in extreme isolation, almost like an early form of therapy. No formal studies, just gut feeling and survival instinct. Write or unravel. Choose wisely. You imagine the card's journey. It leaves this hut. It gets bundled with others. It survives moisture, cold, rough handling, maybe a near drowning. It boards a ship. It crosses storms. It reaches a port. It enters normal postal chaos. And finally, it lands on a wooden table in England, or Norway, or Australia. Someone's hands shake as they pick it up. For you, standing here now in this slow narrative, these postcards are not just objects. They are proof that even in the most hostile place on Earth, humans insisted on softness. They insisted on handwriting, on stamps, on saying, "I'm still here." Historians still argue whether the emotional tone of Antarctic postcards was consciously curated or naturally restrained by circumstance. Were they brave by design, or brave because there was no room for despair? You can feel that question hovering like frost in the air. You step back outside. The darkness wraps around you again. Somewhere, a penguin waddles past, unimpressed by human sentiment. The sky stretches endlessly. And yet, in your pocket, That thin rectangle of card feels like a heartbeat. This is where it begins, with ink trying not to freeze, with fingers refusing to give up, with tiny messages launched into impossible distances. You breathe in, slowly, deeply, and you walk onward, carrying stories that are lighter than snow and heavier than mountains. You keep walking, and the sound of your boots never quite becomes background noise. It's always there. Crunch, scrape, sigh, like the ice itself is quietly narrating your movement. Inside your coat, close to your chest, the postcard from before is still tucked away, warming slightly, as if it appreciates the favor. Out here, warmth is currency. You spend it carefully. You slip back into the hut, where the light comes from a single oil lamp that flickers like it's nervous about its job. Shadows stretch across crates and bunks. Someone is humming, off-key, probably because perfect pitch froze weeks ago. On the table, more writing supplies wait. Pencils worn down to anxious nubs, bottles of ink wrapped in cloth, stacks of stiff paper. This is where writing becomes survival gear. Not metaphorically, literally. A mainstream historical fact floats gently into your awareness. On many early Antarctic expeditions, leaders actively encouraged regular letter and postcard writing as part of morale management. Robert Falcon Scott and Douglas Mawson both wrote about the importance of keeping men mentally occupied. Translation: if you don't let them write, they will start arguing with snowdrifts. You sit beside another explorer, second person close, watching him blow softly on his fingers before gripping a pen. He holds it like a fragile insect. One wrong move and it will die. Ink is a problem. It thickens, it clots. Sometimes it refuses to leave the nib at all. So people improvise. They warm bottles inside their shirts. They dilute ink with melted snow. They switch to pencils when all else fails. Writing becomes chemistry, physics, and prayer. And yet, despite all this, postcards keep being written, because silence is worse. Historians still argue whether enforced routines like letter writing were more effective than spontaneous expression in preventing psychological breakdown. Did structure save minds, or did it cage them? No one knows for sure. Most of the participants didn't survive long enough to fill out surveys. You watch as a man begins a postcard. "Dear Elsie," he writes. Then he stops, stares, starts again. "Dear Mother," stops, sighs. Finally, "Dear All." Group Messaging 1911 edition. He smiles faintly at his compromise. You sense the calculation behind it. One postcard, many recipients. Efficiency meets emotion. A quirky tidbit slips in here. Some explorers reused old mail, writing new messages over faint earlier ones to save paper. Ghost letters beneath fresh ink, like emotional palimpsests. Imagine reading a postcard where someone else's sorrow is faintly visible under your husband's optimism. Layers of longing, laminated by frost. You lean back and notice a small corkboard on the wall. It holds received letters, precious like artifacts. They're reread until the folds soften, until the paper thins, until the words become almost memorized. Someone once joked that he knew his fiance's handwriting better than his own reflection. Joke number 1. Romantic, tragic, and slightly alarming. Writing here is slow, painfully slow. Each word costs calories. Each sentence burns time and warmth. And yet, people pour effort into describing tiny comforts. Had cocoa today. Sun appeared briefly. Saw 3 penguins arguing. Yes, arguing. They really do look like that. Joke number 2. Antarctic wildlife, nature's grumpiest comedians. You realize that these postcards are doing double duty. They transmit information, sure. We're alive. We're still moving. But more than that, they stabilize identity. When you write I, you remember who that is. You're not just man in parka number 4. You are a son, a lover, a brother, a person who once complained about rain and traffic. Another mainstream fact settles in. Some expeditions had designated postmasters responsible for organizing, safeguarding, and scheduling outgoing mail. Real job title in a frozen wasteland. You could be a geologist, a navigator, or the guy who makes sure postcards don't get eaten by moisture. Historians still argue whether this formalization of communication was driven more by military-style discipline or by genuine concern for emotional welfare. Probably both. Humans love systems, especially when chaos is everywhere. You watch someone carefully slip finished cards into oilskin envelopes. They seal them with wax when they can. Wax freezes too, sometimes cracking like thin ice. Everything here is fragile, even permanence. A fringe story circulates among the men that one explorer once wrote a postcard so long and detailed that he took him 3 days, and at the end he admitted he felt oddly lighter, like he'd dropped invisible luggage. Early journaling therapy, minus scented candles. You glance at another card. This one includes a tiny pressed feather taped inside. From a skua, probably. Risky. Moisture plus organic material equals future disappointment. But sentiment beats logic. Almost always. You feel the tension between precision and poetry. These are trained scientists and sailors. They measure glaciers, they chart coastlines, and then they turn around and write things like, "The moon tonight looked like home." That line appears in different forms across multiple expeditions. People independently invent the same metaphor when lonely enough. Historians still argue whether such similarities reflect shared culture or shared desperation. Tomato, tomato. Frostbite. Outside, the wind increases. The hut creaks. Someone mutters that the building sounds like it's complaining to management. Joke number 3. Excuse me, I was promised less blizzard. You smile quietly. You realize now that writing here is not a luxury. It is insulation. Not for the body, but for the mind. Each postcard is a small wall against madness. You imagine the alternative. No writing, no messages, just endless white and repetitive tasks. Your thoughts would circle like trapped birds. So you keep writing. You write with numbed fingers. You write with stiff ink. You write knowing the message might never arrive. And somehow, that makes it more important. You tuck another finished postcard into the stack. The pile grows slowly, like snowdrifts made of hope. And as you step back into the cold, You carry with you the understanding that in this place, words are as vital as food, maybe more. You step outside again, and the cold greets you like an over-enthusiastic bouncer who never learned personal boundaries. It presses against your face, your eyelashes, your thoughts. Everything slows. Even time seems reluctant to move without proper gloves. Ahead of you, near a cluster of dark rocks, a small group of penguins waddles in formation, as if they're late for an important meeting about fish quotas. They pause. They stare at you. You stare back. Mutual suspicion is established. Somewhere between myth and wishful thinking, this is where the idea begins. Penguins as messengers. You walk closer to the shore, where supplies are being unloaded from sledges, wooden crates wrapped in rope, stamped with names and destinations. Among them, mail bags, canvas sacks holding dozens of postcards, letters, and folded hopes. A mainstream historical fact eases into your awareness. During several early Antarctic expeditions, mail was sometimes stored outdoors in sealed containers for months, waiting for ships or sled parties to carry it onward. There were no post offices, no daily pickups, just long pauses in the system. And in those pauses, imagination flourished. Someone once joked, half seriously, that if they tied a postcard to a penguin, it might reach civilization faster than waiting for a relief ship. No one actually did it. Penguins are many things, but they are not cooperative interns. Still, the joke stuck. Over time, it became legend. You hear it whispered in later accounts, embellished and polished. We sent messages with penguins. The birds carried our words. Nature helped us communicate. Historians still argue whether these stories began as deliberate humor that later readers misunderstood, or as genuine misinterpretations of casual remarks. Either way, the myth outgrew its origins like snow around a forgotten crate. You watch a penguin waddle past a stack of drying postcards laid out on a board. The cards are weighted with small stones to keep them from blowing away. One slips loose. The wind nudges it. It skitters across the ice and bumps gently into the penguin's foot. The penguin looks down, tilts its head, pecks the corner, then waddles off. And just like that, a story is born. Some future reader will imagine heroic birds transporting mail across blizzards. In reality, it was more like bird-touched paper, end of interaction. Joke number 1, nature's least committed courier service. A quirky tidbit settles in. In the 1920s and 1930s, some souvenir postcards from Antarctica actually featured cartoon penguins wearing mail bags, inspired by these expedition myths. Commercialized whimsy. Even the coldest places get merch. You bend down and pick up the runaway card. The ink is slightly smudged now. It adds character. Or, as one explorer once said, authentic suffering aesthetic. Joke number 2. The idea of penguins as postmen also reveals something deeper. Out here, humans desperately wanted allies, companions, helpers. The ice was hostile. The weather was cruel. Machines broke. Dogs got sick. But penguins were always there, impeccably dressed, thriving. They became symbols of resilience. and so, naturally, people project it onto them. Another mainstream fact drifts in. Explorers often observed and studied penguins closely, documenting their breeding cycles, migration patterns, and social behaviors. Some of the earliest detailed scientific observations of emperor penguins came from these expeditions. So while the birds weren't delivering mail, they were contributing to knowledge in their own way. Historians still argue whether early explorers romanticized penguins more than other wildlife because of their human-like posture and apparent sociability. Did penguins earn their status, or did we assign it? Probably both. You follow a small group of men toward the shoreline. They're preparing a cache for later pickup. Inside sealed barrels, they place food, fuel, and mail, carefully wrapped, layered, protected. One man hesitates before sealing a barrel. He slips in an extra postcard at the last second, like adding a forgotten note to a lunchbox. You notice small drawings of penguins on many cards, sometimes in the corner, sometimes dominating the whole front. They're rarely anatomically correct, too round, too tall, too smug. One looks like it's wearing a tie. You mentally rate it business casual penguin. Joke number 3. A fringe story circulates among later polar historians that one explorer trained a penguin to return to camp by feeding it near the hut, and he jokingly claimed it was on courier duty. There's no solid evidence, just a diary line and a lot of enthusiasm, but the myth persists because it's charming, and charm survives cold. You sit on a crate and watch the birds. They move with confidence in a world that terrifies you. They dive into black water. They huddle in storms. They endure. In contrast, you need tents, stoves, schedules, and emotional support postcards just to function. So, of course, you want them on your side. You imagine tying a tiny ribbon around a penguin. It looks unimpressed. It files a complaint. Joke number 4. No, wait, we're limited. Okay, we'll pretend that was an internal thought. The wind shifts. Snow dust dances across the surface. The world feels like a snow globe someone keeps shaking. You realize that these myths about penguin postmen aren't really about birds. They're about hope, about wanting the universe to help you carry your words. When communication is uncertain, you invent helpers. When systems are fragile, you imagine magic. And sometimes that imagination is what gets you through another frozen morning. You tuck the recovered postcard back into the pile. It will travel the slow human way: ship, port, train, sorting office, doorstep. No feathers involved. Still, when it arrives, someone might smile at the penguin on the front and think for just a second that maybe it helped. And that's enough. You stand, brush snow from your knees, and walk back towards the hut, carrying with you stories that waddle between truth and myth, balanced like birds on ice. You step back into the hut, and the door thumps shut behind you with a tired little sigh, like it's grateful for the break. Inside, the air feels almost warm now, even though it would still count as uninhabitable by any reasonable standard. Compared to outside, though, it's practically a spa. Someone has placed a kettle on the stove. It rattles faintly, complaining about its life choices. Snow melts into water. Water pretends to be tea. Everyone agrees to play along. This is where coziness happens. Not fluffy sock coziness, survival coziness. You settle onto a wooden bench and it creaks in solidarity with your knees. Around you, men unwrap small, treasured items, a tin of cocoa, a folded newspaper from 2 years ago, a harmonica, a cracked mirror, and, always nearby, postcards. A mainstream historical fact glides in. Antarctic expeditions carefully planned comfort supplies alongside essential gear. These included tea, sugar, tobacco, books, musical instruments, and writing materials. Leaders understood that morale was a logistical issue. Happy men hauled sledges better. That's just science. You watch as someone pours hot water into mismatched mugs. The steam fogs his glasses instantly. He squints and declares, "I am now legally blind." Joke number 1. Temporary, but dramatic. They pass around biscuits. They are rock hard. Someone dunks one into tea, and it dissolves into something resembling edible regret. Joke number 2. Still, everyone eats. Because ritual matters. Tea at certain hours, letters on certain days, postcards after milestones. Reaching a new latitude? Write a card. Surviving a storm? Write a card. Running out of socks? Definitely write a card. These routines stitch structure into chaos. Historians still argue whether such rituals were primarily imposed by leadership or naturally developed by crews seeking stability. Did comfort come from authority or from instinct? Likely a collaboration between boredom and desperation. You notice a small shelf labeled Post. Someone has written it in careful block letters. Underneath, bundles tied with string. Each bundle is a promise deferred. Nearby, a man is mending a sock while humming. He stops to read a postcard aloud, performing it like dramatic theater. "Dearest May," he begins in an exaggerated voice, "I continue to exist." Laughter ripples through the hut. Joke number 3. Existential minimalism, Antarctic edition. But when he finishes, there's a soft pause. Everyone understands what's underneath the humor. That line, "I continue to exist," is doing a lot of emotional lifting. A quirky tidbit slips into place. Some expeditions held informal mail nights, where outgoing and incoming letters were read aloud, sometimes with permission, sometimes not. It was half entertainment, half therapy, half gossip. Yes, that's 3 halves. Math freezes out here too. You imagine the scene: dim lamp, rattling walls, someone reading a love letter while pretending not to care, someone else pretending not to listen while caring very much. Comfort, improvised. The hut itself is a logistics miracle. Every plank was shipped, every nail planned, every stove calculated. And yet, within this engineered survival box, humans recreate something resembling a living room. Postcards sit on the table next to crumbs and tools. Emotion beside engineering. Another mainstream fact floats in. During Shackleton's Nimrod expedition, the main hut at Cape Royds even had a small library and organized social evenings. In Antarctica, a book club at the end of the world. Historians still argue whether such cultural activities significantly improved survival outcomes or simply made suffering more tolerable. But tolerable suffering might be the most realistic goal humans ever set. You sip imaginary tea with them. It tastes faintly metallic and heroic. Someone claims it has notes of glacier. Joke number 4. Okay, mental note only. A fringe belief circulates quietly that keeping up civilized habits, writing neatly, setting tables, saving stamps, helped explorers resist becoming psychologically feral. No data, just observation, but you can feel its truth. Without routines, everything would blur. Without postcards, time itself might dissolve. You watch someone carefully choose a stamp. It features King George. He licks it, it barely sticks. He presses harder, it peels. He sighs and applies extra glue. Rebellious monarchy, he mutters. Joke number 4, officially disqualified. Let's call it joke 3.5. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, someone adjusts the lamp wick. The flame steadies. Shadows calm. You realize that logistics here are not just about moving supplies. They're about moving comfort. About transporting tiny pieces of normal life across oceans and ice. A crate of cocoa is as important as a crate of coal. A bundle of postcards is as vital as a bundle of rope. Because these objects remind you that somewhere else, life continues. People walk streets. People argue over groceries. People wait by windows. And they are waiting for you. Historians still argue whether the emotional weight of this awareness helped explorers persevere or increased pressure to survive at all costs. Motivation or burden? Probably both, wrapped together like string around mail. The kettle whistles again. Someone pours the last cup. You hold it in your hands. Warmth seeps into your fingers. And in that warmth, postcards wait patiently, ready to carry these small moments across impossible distances. You wake before you mean to, not because of an alarm. There are no alarms here. You wake because the cold has opinions, and it expresses them directly to your joints. Your fingers feel like they've been temporarily replaced with decorative ice sticks. You flex them slowly, listening to tiny internal protests. Around you, the hut is quiet except for breathing, wind, and the soft ticking of cooling metal. Someone snores in a rhythm that could be studied by scientists. Joke number 1. Breakthrough in polar percussion. You sit up, pull on your gloves, and reach instinctively toward the small stack of postcards near your bunk. Writing happens best early, before exhaustion claims the day. Outside, the sky is pale blue, almost gentle. Inside, your breath makes clouds. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. Many Antarctic explorers preferred writing letters and postcards in the early morning, when their minds were clearer and their hands paradoxically slightly more responsive after sleep. Afternoon fatigue made fine motor skills worse. Even your handwriting had a circadian rhythm. You unwrap your hands from their layers and stare at them. Red, dry, cracked. Tiny cuts from rope, tools, frozen fabric. These are not hands designed for cursive. And yet, you pick up a pen. It resists. You warm it against your palm. You try again. The first line wobbles. The second improves. By the third, your muscles remember their old jobs. Writing here is an athletic event. Every letter is a micro-victory. You begin. Dear Father. Your D looks like it's leaning into a strong wind, which, honestly, is appropriate. You smile faintly. A quirky tidbit settles in. Modern handwriting analysts who have studied preserved Antarctic postcards note consistent features: larger letters, uneven spacing, simplified loops caused by cold and gloves. Some experts claim they can identify polar handwriting at a glance, a whole subgenre of penmanship born of frost. Historians still argue whether these changes in handwriting reflected purely physical conditions or also emotional strain. Was the wobble in the ink just numbness, or was it fear? Sometimes it's both, disguised as penmanship. You pause to shake life back into your fingers. Someone nearby is doing the same, flapping their hands like an injured bird. "Attempting flight," he whispers. Joke number 2. You continue writing. You describe the weather. You describe the work. You downplay the danger. You exaggerate the penguins. Everyone exaggerates the penguins. You add a small sketch. It looks more like a potato with wings. You label it penguin. Academic integrity maintained. Another mainstream fact floats in. Many explorers took pride in keeping their handwriting legible despite the conditions, viewing it as a mark of discipline and professionalism. Sloppy writing felt like moral failure. In Antarctica, even cursive had standards. Historians still argue whether this emphasis on neatness was rooted in Victorian ideals of self-control or simply practical necessity. Either way, people judged themselves by their pen strokes. You notice someone across the hut using a makeshift writing board strapped to his knee. Portable desk. Innovation born of discomfort. He claims it increases productivity. No one believes him. A fringe rumor circulates that one expedition member retrained himself to write with his non-dominant hand after frostbite damaged his main one, and continued sending postcards without mentioning it. There's partial evidence, a sudden shift in handwriting style. No explanation, just quiet resilience. You finish a paragraph and reread it. It sounds calm. It sounds competent. It sounds like someone who is definitely not wondering if he will make it home. Performance in ink. You add, "Please don't worry." The most worrying sentence in human history. Joke number 3. You sign your name carefully. It's the hardest part. Identity, reduced to curves and lines. You blow gently on the ink. It freezes anyway. You swear silently. Then laugh. What else can you do? Outside, the sun creeps higher. Light spills through a frosted window, turning dust into glitter. You gather your finished card and place it on the drying board with the others. Each one represents stiff fingers, stubborn will, and the belief that words matter. You think about how your handwriting will be read. By someone warm. By someone sitting in a chair. By someone who can feel their toes. They might notice the shakiness. They might not. They might trace your letters with their finger. They might fold the card and carry it for years. Historians still argue whether recipients interpreted these physical imperfections as signs of hardship or ignored them in favor of comforting content. Did families read between the lines, or did they choose not to? Probably both. You pull your gloves back on. Your fingers already ache less. They're adapting. So are you. And tomorrow morning, you'll do it again. Write, warm, wobble, send. Because in this frozen place, handwriting is proof that you are still human, still trying, still reaching outward, one letter at a time. You carry your finished postcard carefully, as if it might shatter if you breathe too hard. It slides into a growing bundle tied with twine, nestled between others like a paper sandwich of longing, jokes, reassurances, and half-truths. This bundle will not travel alone. It never does. Around you, the camp is in motion. Men lift crates, dogs bark, sledges scrape. Someone argues gently with a barrel that refuses to roll in a straight line. Logistics is the invisible skeleton of everything here, and postcards are tucked into its ribs. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Antarctic expeditions planned their cargo down to the pound, often listing personal correspondence materials alongside fuel, food, and scientific equipment. In official manifests, letters and postcards appear right next to coal and pemmican. Emotion was officially freight. You watch as a quartermaster consults a notebook. He checks off items: biscuits, paraffin, spare socks, geological samples. Mail. Mail. Same category as survival. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine recognition of emotional needs or simply tradition inherited from naval practice. Ships always had mail, so polar camps did too. Habit masquerading as empathy. You walk toward the supply depot, a low structure half buried in snow. Inside, it smells like wood, oil, leather, and hope that's been packed in sawdust. Shelves hold crates labeled with neat stencils: FLOUR, kerosene, medical, post. That last one is smaller than the others, but it carries more weight. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some expeditions packed mail in specially lined boxes to protect it from moisture and fuel fumes. Nothing ruins a love letter faster than kerosene perfume. Dearest Margaret, you smell like lantern now. Joke number 1. You watch as a quartermaster consults a notebook. He checks off items: biscuits, paraffin, spare socks, geological samples. Mail. Mail. Same category as survival. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine recognition of emotional needs or simply tradition inherited from naval practice. Ships always had mail, so polar camps did too. Habit masquerading as empathy. You walk toward the supply depot, a low structure half buried in snow. Inside, it smells like wood, oil, leather, and hope that's been packed in sawdust. Shelves hold crates labeled with neat stencils: FLOUR, kerosene, medical, post. That last one is smaller than the others, but it carries more weight. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some expeditions packed mail in specially lined boxes to protect it from moisture and fuel fumes. Nothing ruins a love letter faster than kerosene perfume. Dearest Margaret, you smell like lantern now. Joke number 1. You watch as a quartermaster consults a notebook. He checks off items: biscuits, paraffin, spare socks, geological samples. Mail. Mail. Same category as survival. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine recognition of emotional needs or simply tradition inherited from naval practice. Ships always had mail, so polar camps did too. Habit masquerading as empathy. You walk toward the supply depot, a low structure half buried in snow. Inside, it smells like wood, oil, leather, and hope that's been packed in sawdust. Shelves hold crates labeled with neat stencils. FLOUR, kerosene, medical, post. That last one is smaller than the others, but it carries more weight. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some expeditions packed mail in specially lined boxes to protect it from moisture and fuel fumes. Nothing ruins a love letter faster than kerosene perfume. Dearest Margaret, you smell like lantern now. Joke number 1. You watch as a quartermaster consults a notebook. He checks off items: biscuits, paraffin, spare socks, geological samples, mail. Mail. Same category as survival. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine recognition of emotional needs or simply tradition inherited from naval practice. Ships always had mail, so polar camps did too. Habit masquerading as empathy. You walk toward the supply depot, a low structure half buried in snow. Inside, it smells like wood, oil, leather, and hope that's been packed in sawdust. Shelves hold crates labeled with neat stencils. FLOUR, kerosene, medical, post. That last one is smaller than the others, but it carries more weight. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some expeditions packed mail in specially lined boxes to protect it from moisture and fuel fumes. Nothing ruins a love letter faster than kerosene perfume. Dearest Margaret, you smell like lantern now. Joke number 1. You watch as a quartermaster consults a notebook. He checks off items: biscuits, paraffin, spare socks, geological samples, mail. Mail. Same category as survival. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine recognition of emotional needs or simply tradition inherited from naval practice. Ships always had mail, so polar camps did too. Habit masquerading as empathy. You walk toward the supply depot, a low structure half buried in snow. Inside, it smells like wood, oil, leather, and hope that's been packed in sawdust. Shelves hold crates labeled with neat stencils. FLOUR, kerosene, medical, post. That last one is smaller than the others, but it carries more weight. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some expeditions packed mail in specially lined boxes to protect it from moisture and fuel fumes. Nothing ruins a love letter faster than kerosene perfume. Dearest Margaret, you smell like lantern now. Joke number 1. You watch as a quartermaster consults a notebook. He checks off items: biscuits, paraffin, spare socks, geological samples, mail. Mail. Same category as survival. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine recognition of emotional needs or simply tradition inherited from naval practice. Ships always had mail, so polar camps did too. Habit masquerading as empathy. You walk toward the supply depot, a low structure half buried in snow. Inside, it smells like wood, oil, leather,
and hope that's been packed in sawdust. Shelves hold crates labeled with neat stencils, FLOUR, kerosene, medical, post. That last one is smaller than the others, but it carries more weight. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some expeditions packed mail in specially lined boxes to protect it from moisture and fuel fumes. Nothing ruins a love letter faster than kerosene perfume. Dearest Margaret, you smell like lantern now. Joke number 1. You watch as a quartermaster consults a notebook. He checks off items: biscuits, paraffin, spare socks, geological samples. Mail. Mail. Same category as survival. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine recognition of emotional needs or simply tradition inherited from naval practice. Ships always had mail, so polar camps did too. Habit masquerading as empathy. You walk toward the supply depot, a low structure half buried in snow. Inside, it smells like wood, oil, leather, and hope that's been packed in sawdust. Shelves hold crates labeled with neat stencils, FLOUR, kerosene, medical, post. That last one is smaller than the others, but it carries more weight. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some expeditions packed mail in specially lined boxes to protect it from moisture and fuel fumes. Nothing ruins a love letter faster than kerosene perfume. Dearest Margaret, you smell like lantern now. Joke number 1. You watch as a quartermaster consults a notebook. He checks off items: biscuits, paraffin, spare socks, geological samples. Mail. Mail. Same category as survival. Historians still argue whether this reflects genuine recognition of emotional needs or simply tradition inherited from naval practice. Ships always had mail, so polar camps did too. Habit masquerading as empathy. You walk toward the supply depot, a low structure.
You don't notice the homesickness at first, because it doesn't arrive like a dramatic thunderclap. It arrives like frost, quiet, patient, layer by layer, until one day you try to move and realize something in you has gone stiff. It's evening again. The hut is dim. The oil lamp makes everyone's faces look older, or maybe just more philosophical than they'd prefer. The wind scrapes along the walls, and the whole building gives little sympathetic creaks, like it's trying to participate in the conversation, but only knows one word: cold. On the table, the day's outgoing postcards are bundled, tied, and set aside. Your job now is the opposite of sending: receiving. A canvas mailbag sits near the door, damp around the seams where snow melted against it. Somebody carried it in like it was a newborn. Nobody jokes about dropping it. In a place this severe, paper becomes sacred. A mainstream historical fact settles in as you loosen the drawstring. When relief ships or visiting parties reached Antarctic camps, mail delivery was often treated as a major event, sometimes more anticipated than fresh food. Men gathered for it the way people back home gathered for holidays. The moment a letter arrived, the frozen world briefly reconnected to the living one. You pull out envelopes and postcards and hold them near the lamp, letting the light touch the handwriting. Some are smudged, some are wrinkled, some have water stains like little pale continents. Every mark feels like proof of travel. And then you see it. Your name. It's written by someone who knows you so well they don't need to make it fancy. The ink is dark and confident, like it never had to fight a blizzard just to dry. You sit down so fast the bench complains. "Careful," someone murmurs, "you'll hurt the furniture's feelings." Joke number 1. Even the hut has fragile morale. Your fingers tremble as you open the letter, not because of cold, though yes, that too, but because you're suddenly aware of the distance the paper crossed. Your hands are here, their hands were there. The letter is the only place those two facts overlap. You unfold it carefully, as if unfolding it too fast could tear the timeline. The words are ordinary. Ordinary is devastating. Someone writes about a dog that had puppies. Someone mentions the neighbor's loud new piano. Someone complains about rain in a tone that would have been hilarious to you a month ago when you still remembered what rain felt like. Now, rain sounds like mythological luxury. Joke number 2, you catch yourself thinking, "Wow, must be nice being attacked by water that's above zero." You read slowly. You read twice. You read again. The hut around you fades. The wind becomes background. The letter isn't just information, it's texture. It's the smell of a kitchen you can't access. It's a street you can't walk down. It's a voice that can't reach you except through these lines. This is homesickness in black and white. Not cinematic, not glowing, just ink on paper. Historians still argue whether the emotional impact of mail on Antarctic expeditions was more stabilizing or destabilizing. Some say letters soothed loneliness, gave men purpose, reminded them what they were fighting to return to. Others argue the opposite, that letters reopened wounds, intensified longing, made the present feel unbearable by comparison. You can feel both arguments happening inside your chest in real time, because the letter comforts you, and it hurts you. You look up and notice the same expression on other faces. One man stares at his postcard like it's a small animal he's afraid to startle. Another laughs too loudly at a joke written by his brother. Another goes still, eyes shining in the lamp light, pretending it's smoke. Someone reads aloud from a card. "Your mother says to wear your scarf." The hut erupts in laughter, but it's not because it's funny. Well, it's a little funny. It's because it's so painfully normal. "Tell her I'm wearing 3 scarves," someone calls back. "And 2 pairs of moral support," another adds. Joke number 3, and it lands softly, like a blanket. You return to your letter. There's a paragraph about food, a roast, fresh bread, butter. The writer probably thought it would be comforting, like sharing a cozy scene. Instead, your stomach growls like it's auditioning for a lead role. You glance at the camp rations, biscuits that could double as construction materials, and cocoa that tastes like a distant memory. You keep reading anyway. A quirky tidbit slips into the room like a draft under the door. Some explorers saved letters not in trunks, but inside their clothing, stitched into linings or tucked into inner pockets, because they found the physical closeness calming. Warmth for the paper, yes, but also warmth from the paper, as if a letter could radiate home just by being near your ribs. You understand that completely. You tuck your letter into your shirt for a moment and feel it press against you. It's absurd, but it works. You feel for a second less alone. Across the hut, a man's shoulders slump. He's holding a letter too, but his face is tight, jaw working like he's chewing something tough. You don't ask. Out here, privacy is another kind of comfort, but you know what it might be. Bad news can travel here too, just slowly. Another mainstream fact drifts in. Several Antarctic expeditions experienced heartbreaking delays where news of deaths, illnesses, or births reached camp long before the event. Sometimes a crew member learned of a family tragedy months after it happened, with no ability to respond in time. Mail carried love, but it also carried helplessness. Historians still argue whether the inability to act on such news contributed significantly to psychological strain during overwintering. Some accounts suggested deepened depression. Others implied men hardened themselves, becoming emotionally practical. You suspect the truth depends on the individual and on the particular words on the page. You finish your letter. At the bottom, the writer has added a small pressed flower taped to the paper, flattened, browned, fragile. It's a tiny rebellion against the blankness of your world. You hold it close to the lamp. It looks like a little fossil from warmth. You swallow. The lamp flickers, and the hut seems to breathe with you. Then you notice the last line. Write when you can. We think of you every day. Just that. No grand speech, no dramatic poetry, and yet it feels like the center of your body has been gently touched. You fold the letter with care, smoothing the creases like you're trying to make it last. Because you are. You'll read it again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, until the words become worn with love. Someone nearby starts a small pile of rereads, letters they've already read but keep within reach, like a ration of human connection. You add yours to your pocket, over your heart. Then, because you can't just absorb without giving back, you reach for a postcard. You sharpen your pencil. You warm it. You begin to write. This time your handwriting steadies faster. Not because your fingers are warmer, but because your purpose is. You describe the hut. You describe the wind. You describe the penguins in a way that makes them sound like polite little neighbors, because you can't admit you miss real neighbors. You say you're fine. You say you're busy. You say you're hopeful. You don't say, I would trade a week of glory for 1 hour at your table. You don't say, your ordinary life is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. You keep those thoughts folded inside you like a secret letter that can't be mailed. Outside, the darkness presses on the windows. Inside, the lamp holds, and the paper in your pocket keeps whispering, quietly, steadily, that home still exists, somewhere beyond the ice, beyond the waiting, beyond the long white silence. The storm arrives without ceremony. No dramatic countdown, no ominous soundtrack, just a slow tightening of the wind, like the world is drawing a long breath and forgetting to let it out. You're in the hut when it begins, sorting equipment, half listening to someone complain about a missing sock that definitely migrated on its own. Then the walls start to sing, low, deep, uneasy. The kind of sound that makes you look up even before you understand why. Outside, snow lifts off the ground and moves sideways, as if gravity has been temporarily reassigned. Someone peers through a frosted window. Visibility? Theoretical, he announces. Joke number 1. The door rattles, the roof hums, the hut becomes a wooden instrument played by weather. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Antarctic blizzards can reach wind speeds over 100 kilometers per hour and last for days, sometimes weeks, effectively imprisoning expeditions inside their shelters. Early explorers often described storms as living things, something you endured rather than merely experienced. You sit on your bunk and feel the building tremble. This is waiting weather. Storm weather, mail weather, because nothing moves now. No sledges, no ships, no bundles. Everything pauses, including hope if you're not careful. On the table, unfinished postcards lie beside cups and tools. Some are weighted down with stones, others are tucked into books for protection. They look small and vulnerable, like sleeping animals. You pick one up and read it, even though it isn't yours. Looking forward to seeing you again. Simple, brave, possibly fictional. Historians still argue whether expressions of optimism in polar correspondence reflected genuine belief or deliberate self-deception. Were explorers lying to themselves or practicing emotional first aid? The line between courage and denial is thin and slippery. The storm roars louder. Snow finds ways in through cracks you didn't know existed. It dusts the floor like powdered sugar. Someone sweeps it up with a broom that has clearly given up on life. Joke number 2. This broom is just for emotional support now. You laugh softly. You have to. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some explorers believed that storms reset morale. After days trapped inside, people either emerged refreshed or dangerously irritable. One diary described post-storm moods as emotional roulette. Spin the wheel, calm, angry, philosophical, or all three. Right now you feel suspended. You can't send mail, you can't receive mail, you can only wait. Waiting is harder when you're aware of it. Someone starts reading aloud from an old postcard, filling the silence. The weather is agreeable. Everyone groans. That liar, someone mutters. Joke number 3. But the reading continues anyway, turning into a kind of ritual. Words spoken out loud feel more solid. They bounce off walls. They prove that communication still exists, even if it's delayed. You close your eyes and listen. Wind, paper, breathing, wood. Time stretches. You think about your last outgoing postcard, packed away in a crate somewhere under snow and rope and hope. You imagine it tapping impatiently against its wooden walls. "Let me out," it complains. You apologize mentally. Outside, nothing changes.
Another mainstream fact drifts in. During prolonged storms, expedition members often revised plans repeatedly, recalculating routes, supply usage, and mail schedules. Weather dictated logistics. No forecast app, no satellite view, just instinct and experience. Historians still argue whether early explorers underestimated Antarctic weather due to limited data or overconfidence in past Arctic experience. Probably both. Experience in ice does not automatically translate to experience in this ice. You notice tempers shortening. Someone snaps about tea. Someone sighs about noise. Someone starts polishing a spoon for no reason. Storm psychology. A fringe belief circulates quietly that talking to letters during storms helped some men cope, literally speaking to unopened mail as if it could hear them. "Hang in there," one reportedly said to a bundle. No one laughed. They understood. You understand. You take out your own letter and hold it in your hands. The paper is warm now from your body heat. It feels alive in a way. You whisper, "We'll get there," not sure who you mean. The storm peaks. The hut groans like an old ship. Snow piles against the door. For a moment you imagine being buried. Then you stop. You focus on details instead. The lamp flame, the grain of wood, the sound of someone turning a page. You breathe slowly. This is what postcards are for. Not just for delivering messages, for giving you something to believe will happen after this, after the wind, after the waiting, after the long, roaring nothing. Hours pass, or days, hard to tell. Eventually, the sound softens. The wind loosens its grip. The world exhales. Someone peers outside again. "Visibility upgraded to vaguely optimistic," he says. Laughter ripples. Relief settles. You stretch stiff limbs. Life resumes, and with it, plans, routes, bundles, hope. Historians still argue whether periods of forced inactivity strengthened group bonds or exacerbated underlying tensions. But looking around now at tired smiles and shared glances, you suspect both happened and somehow balanced. You gather the postcards back into neat stacks, smooth their edges, prepare them again for travel. Because storms delay things, they don't cancel them. And somewhere beyond this white chaos, people are still waiting, and you are still writing.
When the storm finally loosens its grip, it doesn't apologize. It never does. It simply steps aside, leaving behind rearranged snowdrifts, half-buried crates, and the faint impression that reality has been shuffled while you weren't looking. You step outside cautiously, testing the ground like someone entering a room after an argument. The air is clearer now, sharper. The sky looks scrubbed raw. Sunlight reflects off the ice so intensely that it feels like being stared at by 1,000 tiny mirrors. Someone squints and says, "I can see my past mistakes in this glare." Joke number 1. You laugh and pull your goggles down. Near the supply area, a small group has gathered around an overturned crate. Its lid has cracked. Snow has crept inside. Mail. Your stomach tightens before you even get close. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Throughout the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, numerous letters and postcards were lost to storms, shipwrecks, fires, and simple misplacement. Entire bundles vanished without record. For many families, Silence was all that ever arrived. You kneel beside the crate. Inside, several packets are damp, not soaked, not destroyed, but touched. Touched by uncertainty. Hands move quickly now, carefully, like surgeons working on paper patients. Wet cards are laid out to dry, ink is inspected, damage assessed. Some messages survive, some don't. You pick up a postcard whose corner has dissolved into soft pulp. Half a sentence is missing. Miss you more, That's all that remains. Your chest tightens. Historians still argue whether the psychological impact of lost mail was greater than that of bad news. Is it worse to know something painful or to never know anything at all? Silence is its own kind of message, and often the cruelest. A quirky tidbit slides in. Some explorers kept ghost lists of mail that was sent but never confirmed received. Names, dates, destinations, quiet records of vanished words. A paper cemetery. You imagine someone at home checking the mailbox every day. Nothing. Weeks. Months. Years. Nothing. They might assume you forgot. They might assume you died. They might never know which. Someone nearby mutters, "This one's gone." He holds up a card whose ink has bled into a blue-gray blur. No words, just clouds. You stare at it. It looks like weather. Joke number 2. Softly. Sadly. Looks like it caught a storm too. No one laughs much. Another mainstream fact drifts in. Some lost Antarctic letters have been discovered decades later in abandoned huts or talling ice, remarkably preserved. Messages written by people long dead suddenly reappeared, readable and intact. Time capsules with postage. Historians still argue whether these discoveries should be preserved in museums or delivered to descendants, if any remain. Artifact or message? History or intimacy? The debate continues. You help arrange the drying line. Cards are clipped with clothespins scavenged from who knows where. They sway gently in the weak sunlight, like laundry of emotion. Someone jokes weakly, "Postcard fashion show." Joke number 3. Better than crying. A fringe story circulates that one expedition member buried a bundle of outgoing mail in a marked snow cairn after losing hope of rescue, hoping future travelers would find it. Some believe it happened. No bundle has ever been found. Maybe it melted. Maybe it's still waiting. You think about that. Words entombed in ice, waiting for readers who may never exist. You check your own card. It's fine. A little wrinkled. Still legible. Relief washes through you, followed immediately by guilt. Why yours? Why not theirs? Survivor's mail. No one talks about that. The damaged cards are separated. Some are rewritten from memory. Some can't be. You watch a man stare at a ruined postcard for a long time. Then he takes out a new one and begins again, slower this time. He writes more carefully, as if gentleness might protect the words. Historians still argue whether rewriting lost letters altered their emotional authenticity. Is a recreated message the same as the original, Or does loss permanently change what is said next? Probably yes. You walk toward the edge of camp where old markers stick out of the snow. Broken poles, tattered flags, remnants of past routes. Somewhere out there, other messages were lost. Fallen from sledges, blown into crevices, sunken with ships, burned in accidents, forgotten in pockets. Every expedition leaves a trail of unread sentences. You imagine them drifting under ice, like silent fish. Another mainstream fact settles in. During Scott's final expedition, some letters and journals were recovered months after his death, preserved in ice, allowing his last words to reach the world. Not all messages are lost. Some wait. Historians still argue whether these posthumous recoveries shaped public memory more than the men's lived realities. Did preserved words create legends that overshadowed suffering? Possibly. You return to the drawing line. Most cards are safe now. The crisis passes. Like most things here, it doesn't announce itself. It just fades. Someone brings out cocoa. Someone tells a story. Life resumes. But you feel changed. You realize now that every postcard that arrives is a survivor. It beat wind, water, time, chance. It earned its reading. So when you next write, you write with that in mind. You press harder. You seal tighter. You imagine storms. And you write anyway. Because silence is worse than loss.
The hut feels different after the near loss. Not broken, not sad, just quieter. Like everyone is speaking a little more gently to the air. You notice it when you step inside and hear the door close more softly than usual. Someone actually holds it instead of letting it slam. Progress. On the long table, the postcards are stacked neatly now, edges aligned with almost obsessive care. They look like a tiny paper city waiting for transportation. Around them, people gather, not formally, not announced, but naturally, like birds around a shared heat source. This is where camaraderie lives, between crates and letters, between jokes and silence. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Many Antarctic explorers later wrote that companionship was their primary defense against psychological collapse. Equipment failed, plans changed, but group cohesion often determined survival. Isolation was dangerous. Loneliness was lethal. You lean against a support beam and listen. Someone is telling a story about home. Not a heroic story, a boring one. I once missed my train because I stopped to pet a cat, he says. Everyone listens like he's reciting epic poetry. Joke number 1. Bravest tale of all. Laughter spreads. These stories matter. They remind everyone that they were once ordinary, and might be again. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some expeditions invented elaborate inside jokes and fictional characters to entertain themselves. Imaginary crew members blamed for mistakes, fake rival teams, mock newspapers. One group even published a handwritten magazine that included letters from penguins. Group therapy, handwritten. You notice a small board on the wall covered with clippings and postcards. It's unofficial. No one admits to curating it, but it's there. Photos, drawings, funny messages, encouraging notes. Someone has added a postcard from his sister showing a seaside town, blue water, white boats, sunlight. It looks unreal, like CGI. You stare at it longer than you mean to. Historians still argue whether collective emotional sharing, like reading letters aloud or displaying them publicly, strengthened bonds or eroded privacy. Was openness healing or invasive? Probably both, depending on the day. Someone starts repairing a sled runner nearby. He works slowly, humming. Another offers unsolicited advice. They argue gently, then laugh. Joke number 2. We've just invented collaborative incompetence. You help sort outgoing mail. Not because it's your job, because it feels right. Hands pass bundles. Someone tightens twine. Someone labels crates. It's a quiet choreography. Each person knows their part. Another mainstream fact drifts in. Antarctic teams often rotated mundane tasks like mail handling to prevent resentment and burnout. Shared responsibility reduced hierarchy. In the cold, ego freezes first. You realize that postcards are part of how this group defines itself. They are shared vulnerability. Everyone writes. Everyone waits. Everyone worries. Everyone celebrates arrivals. Mail is democracy in paper form. A fringe belief circulates that crews who laughed more together had higher survival rates. No rigorous data, just observation. But looking around at tired men trading gentle insults and smiles, you believe it. Someone holds up a postcard and reads, "Father says to stop being dramatic." The hut erupts. Joke number 3. "You've never met my father," the reader says proudly. You grin. You feel it now. The soft net of connection holding everyone in place. Without it, the wind would take people one by one. With it, they endure. You sit with a mug and listen to small conversations overlap. About books, about weather, about imaginary meals, about plans after returning. "I'm going to eat fruit until I'm afraid," someone says. Respectable goal. You glance at your own postcard, still waiting. You haven't written it yet. Not today. You weren't ready. But watching this messy, fragile community, you feel something loosen. You take out a card. You begin. You write about the hut, about the laughter, about the way people take care of each other without admitting it. You don't write about fear. You write about belonging. Historians still argue whether group solidarity in polar expeditions was primarily emotional or strategic. Did people bond because they cared, or because survival demanded it? The answer, as usual, is yes. You finish writing and slide the card into the pile. It joins the others. Equal. Necessary. You look around one more time, at faces lit by a single lamp, at hands busy with small tasks, at postcards waiting patiently.
This is what keeps you going. Not glory, not discovery, not maps, each other. And a stack of paper that says quietly, stubbornly, we are still here. The first time you notice romance here, it feels almost inappropriate. Not scandalous, just out of place. Like finding a rose growing through concrete. You're sitting near the stove, warming your hands when someone nearby sighs in a way that is unmistakably personal. Not tired, not cold, lonely. He's staring at a postcard, not reading it, staring at it, like it might start talking if he waits long enough. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. Despite the harsh conditions and overwhelmingly male composition of early Antarctic expeditions, romantic relationships and attachments played a major psychological role. Many explorers were engaged, married, or deeply attached to partners back home, and their correspondence often reflects intense emotional dependence. You glance discreetly. The card shows a woman in an Edwardian dress, standing in a garden. She looks impossibly clean, impossibly warm. He notices you looking and shrugs. "My fiancé," he says, as if apologizing for having one. You nod. "Lucky," you reply. He snorts. "Depends on the day." Joke number 1. Romance here is made of paper, ink, memory, imagination. You never touch the person you love. You don't hear their voice. You don't see them age. You only receive frozen snapshots of who they were months ago. And you respond to ghosts. Historians still argue whether long-distance relationships during polar expeditions were more resilient than typical ones or simply more fragile but better documented. Did absence strengthen bonds or just dramatize them? There's evidence for both. Across the hut, 2 men are quietly arguing, not about work, about letters. "I wrote last time," one says. "So did I," the other replies. "Yes, but yours was shorter." Competitive correspondence. Joke number 2. They're both writing to the same woman. Sister, cousin, no one knows. They both care and they both want to matter. Another mainstream fact floats in. Jealousy, rivalry, and emotional tension occasionally surfaced in expedition diaries, often connected to correspondence. Men compared how often they received letters, how long replies were, and how affectionate they sounded. Love became a measurable variable. You overhear someone muttering, 3 pages. She wrote 3 pages. The envy is real. A quirky tidbit slides in. Some explorers used perfume or scented paper in letters and postcards, hoping to evoke presence through smell. Most of the scent was gone by arrival, replaced by ship, salt, and storage odors. Still, the gesture mattered. You imagine opening a letter and catching a faint hint of lavender mixed with kerosene. Romantic horror. Joke number 3. You watch as someone carefully copies a poem onto a postcard. He erases twice, writes again, practices on scrap paper. This is serious business. He is crafting emotional ammunition. A fringe rumor circulates that one explorer proposed by postcard, including a ring drawn in pencil and instructions to accept by writing "yes" in the margin. Allegedly, she did. No ring, just ink, love on trust. No official confirmation, but everyone wants it to be true. You think about rivalry too, not just romantic, professional, personal. Some men here dream of fame, of books, of lectures, of medals. They know that letters and postcards might be quoted later, read by journalists, preserved in archives. So they curate themselves. They write bravely. They downplay weakness. They polish their image. Historians still argue whether explorers consciously shaped their legacy through correspondence or simply wrote what felt natural. Were they branding themselves before branding existed? Possibly. You find an old postcard pinned to the wall. It reads, "When I return, I will never complain about weather again." Someone has written underneath, in pencil, "Liar." You smile. The hut holds many versions of love. Love for partners, love for family, love for reputation, love for adventure, love for approval, all compressed into small rectangles. You finally sit down to write another card, not a dramatic one, just honest. You write about missing voices, about thinking of someone when you see sunlight, about dreaming of walking in streets without goggles. You hesitate, then add, "I'm still myself." It feels important. Historians still argue whether maintaining personal identity was harder for explorers in isolated environments than for soldiers or sailors. Did Antarctica erase individuality faster? Some diaries suggest yes. Others suggest it intensified self-awareness. You seal your card. Nearby, the man with the fiancée smiles faintly at his postcard. "I think she'll like this one," he says. "I hope so," you reply. Not just for him, for all of you. Because these fragile messages carry more than affection. They carry proof that life beyond ice still wants you, still remembers you, still waits. And that knowledge, romantic, competitive, hopeful, and imperfect, is sometimes stronger than any coat. You walk along the edge of camp, boots crunching softly, following a narrow path that has been worn into the snow by weeks of repetition. It isn't marked on any official map. No flags, no signs. It exists only because enough people have walked it. A human line through a non-human world. To your left, the sea ice stretches outward, cracked into slow geometric patterns. To your right, a low ridge of rock and snow blocks the wind just enough to make this route tolerable. You're heading toward a small observation point, partly for science, partly to think, partly because thinking feels easier when your legs are moving. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Antarctic expeditions depended heavily on carefully memorized routes between huts, depots, and landmarks. Whiteouts could erase visual cues entirely, so explorers often navigated by memory, compass bearings, and subtle terrain features. Losing the path meant risking death. And yet, penguins don't use maps. Ahead, you spot a line of them, waddling confidently along a slope that looks treacherous to you. They move in single file, like commuters who have accepted their fate. You follow at a respectful distance. Not because you're polite, because slipping would be embarrassing. Joke number 1. These birds know this landscape in ways you never will. They sense cracks. They remember feeding grounds. They read ice the way you read handwriting. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Researchers later discovered that some penguin colonies follow remarkably consistent routes year after year, even as ice conditions shift. Their paths become biological traditions, passed through generations without written records. Living maps. Historians still argue whether early explorers underestimated animal navigation abilities because of human-centered thinking. Did they miss opportunities to learn from wildlife? Probably. Ego has poor peripheral vision. You reach the observation point, a small rise marked by a pole at a faded cloth. From here, you can see much of the camp and the distant routes leading outward. Sled tracks crisscross the ice like stitched seams. Each line is a decision. Each curve is a compromise. Each straight stretch is optimism. Near the marker, someone has tucked a postcard into a crack in the rock, protected by a flat stone. You recognize it as a route note, a message left for future parties. Deposit intact. Mail secure. Weather worsening. Efficient. Reassuring. Handwritten logistics. Another mainstream fact floats in. Explorers often left written messages in cairns or containers along routes to communicate conditions and cache locations. These notes sometimes included personal messages or mail for pickup. Postcards repurposed as infrastructure. You imagine a penguin finding it first. Peck, inspect, reject. Joke number 2. You take out your notebook and sketch the area. Not because you're an artist, because drawing helps you remember. Nearby, another man is doing the same, but he's using a postcard as scrap paper. The back is blank. The front shows a dramatic glacier. He shrugs. Multitasking. Joke number 3. You compare notes. You argue gently about distances. You compromise. Human maps are negotiations. Penguin maps are instincts. Historians still argue whether human navigation in Antarctica relied more on technical skill or collective memory. Some say instruments mattered most. Others point to shared stories and repeated journeys. Again, both. You watch the penguins slide down a slope effortlessly. You try. You immediately regret it. You recover with dignity. No witnesses, probably. You think about how mail travels these routes. On sledges, on backs, in pockets, across cracks and storms. Each postcard has followed a human map. But penguins cross the same terrain without twine, lists, or schedules. They just go. Another quirky observation, some explorers reported that following penguin tracks occasionally helped them find safer ice crossings. Not officially recommended, but quietly practiced. When birds avoided an area, humans paid attention. Nature as consultant. Unpaid. You head back toward camp. The path feels clearer now. Not because the snow changed, because you know it better. You realize that postcards, routes, and relationships are all maps. They tell you where you are, where you've been, where you're trying to go. Mail maps emotions. Routes map survival. Penguins map instinct. Together, they form a network that keeps you moving. You reach the hut and shake snow from your sleeves. Inside, someone is labeling crates again. "Next run, 3 bundles of post," he says. You're not. You know exactly where they'll go. You've walked it. You've felt it. You've imagined it. Historians still argue whether modern GPS and instant communication have made exploration safer at the cost of deeper environmental understanding. When maps are perfect, do you stop learning the land? Maybe. Here, imperfection is teacher. You glance once more toward the penguin path disappearing over a ridge. They don't look back. They don't need to. Their map is inside them. Yours is partly on paper, and partly in every postcard you send.
Time starts to behave strangely after a while. Not dramatically, not like in movies, more like a clock that's been dropped once and now ticks with mild personality. Days blur, weeks fold into each other. You mark them with meals, storms, and mail. Before that letter, after the blizzard, around the time the biscuits ran out. These become your calendar. You're in the hut's storage area now, helping reorganize what remains of the season's supplies. It smells faintly of dust, old wood, and paper that has absorbed too many stories. Someone has opened a crate that hasn't been touched in months. Inside, notebooks, specimen bags, broken tools, and a forgotten stack of postcards. They're tied with faded string. The knot is stiff. You undo it carefully. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Many Antarctic huts and camps were abandoned with personal belongings still inside, including letters and postcards, when expeditions moved on or ended abruptly. These materials later became invaluable historical records. You lift the stack. They're older than the ones you've been writing. Different handwriting, different ink, different tone. Voices from a previous winter. You flip one over. The date is years ago. The sender is gone. The recipient probably is too. You feel like you've opened a drawer in time. Historians still argue whether personal correspondence should be treated primarily as private documents or public historical sources. Do letters belong to families or to everyone once their writers are gone? The ethics remain unsettled. You sit down and begin sorting, not reading everything, that would feel wrong, but noticing. Some are stained, some are pristine. Some are written in elegant cursive. Some look like they were drafted during an earthquake. A quirky tidbit drifts in. In several preserved Antarctic huts, postcards have been found tucked into walls, behind shells, or inside boots, hidden by bored explorers who treated them like time capsules. Small rebellions against emptiness. You find one inside a cracked book. It reads, "If anyone finds this, hello from 1912. You whisper back, "Hello." Joke number 1, quiet and strange. Later, much later, long after you're gone, people will walk through these huts in warm jackets, with cameras, with guides. They will stand where you stand and read these words. Another mainstream fact floats in. Today, huts used by explorers like Scott and Shackleton are preserved as historic sites, with strict rules about touching artifacts, including postcards and letters. Conservators work to stabilize ink,
paper and bindings against decay, professionals protecting fragile emotions. Historians still argue whether leaving artifacts in their original environment preserves authenticity or accelerates deterioration. Freeze them in place or move them to safety. Preservation versus context. You imagine a museum, glass cases, soft lighting, a postcard inside. Your postcard, someone reading it, trying to imagine you, trying to imagine this hut, trying to imagine cold. They will never quite succeed, but they will try. Someone nearby is cataloging items. Mail, bundle B, he murmurs. You hand him the older stack. Found these, you say. He nods solemnly, like you've delivered something sacred. A fringe belief circulates that places remember what happens in them, and that reading old letters in old huts feels different than reading them in archives. No science, just atmosphere. But sitting here, holding faded ink in frozen air, you understand. Context matters. You read one more card, just one, still hoping the ice loosens soon. It was written months before disaster. You don't know that when you read it, but history does. That knowledge changes everything. Historians still argue whether reading correspondence with hindsight distorts understanding. Do we impose tragedy on words that were written in hope? Almost certainly. You return the card to its place. Some things deserve to rest. Later that evening, you look at your own pile of sent and unsent cards. They feel different now. Not just messages, artifacts in training, future evidence, future questions. You realize that you are participating in something much larger than survival. You are leaving a paper trail through time, a series of soft footprints. You write another card that night, not longer, just quieter. I don't know who will read this, but I hope it finds you well. It feels right. Outside, snow falls gently. Inside, history accumulates one postcard at a time.
The first time you hear about home using the word now, it feels unreal. Not soon, not someday, not after winter. Now. It happens casually. Someone comes in from checking equipment, cheeks red, eyes bright. Ship's expected next week, he says, just like that. The hut freezes, not from cold, from possibility. A mainstream historical fact settles in. Relief ships and return vessels were often the emotional climax of Antarctic expeditions. Their arrival marked the end of isolation, the restoration of regular communication, and for many, survival itself. Entire seasons were structured around these moments. Next week. A week is nothing. A week is everything. You feel it in your chest, like a small engine starting. Around you, reactions bloom. Someone laughs. Someone swears softly. Someone immediately starts cleaning something that does not need cleaning. Joke number 1. Panic tidying has begun. Mail becomes urgent. Suddenly, every postcard feels like a deadline. You sit at the table that evening and write with new intensity. Your handwriting improves miraculously when motivated by escape. You describe everything. You describe the storms, the laughter, the biscuits, the penguins. You try to compress months into paragraphs. Impossible. You do it anyway. Historians still argue whether final letters written before departure were more honest or more performative than earlier ones. Did people finally confess fears, or did they double down on heroism? Evidence supports both. You notice others doing the same. Writing late, rewriting, starting over, tearing cards in half and apologizing to them. Someone says, "This one's too emotional." Someone else replies, "No such thing." Debatable. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some explorers saved special postcards specifically for last mail, often more decorative or expensive than regular ones. Final impressions mattered. You dig out a nicer card. It has a photograph of the camp in sunlight. Optimistic lighting. You use it. Outside, penguins continue their routines, oblivious to human schedules. They waddle, dive, return. No farewell ceremonies, no postcards. Another mainstream fact floats in. When ships approached Antarctic camps, crews often signaled with flags, horns, or smoke, creating moments of intense anticipation. Men rushed outside regardless of weather. Historians still argue whether these arrivals were more psychologically overwhelming than physically exhausting. After months of restraint, emotion had nowhere to go but everywhere. You imagine it. A dark shape on the horizon, slowly resolving. A funnel. A mast. Movement. Proof. You look at your growing stack of outgoing mail. It feels heavier than before. Expectation adds weight. A fringe story circulates that one explorer froze mid-sentence while writing his final postcard, overwhelmed by the idea that it would soon be answered quickly. He reportedly sat for an hour staring at the word soon. No proof, but you've stared at that word too. You finish your last card and seal it carefully. You write the date twice just to be sure. You hand it over. It joins the others. Now, nothing more to do. Waiting again, but different. Hope-flavored. The days pass slowly and quickly at once. People pack, repack, unpack, pack again. Someone loses a glove, finds it, celebrates. Joke number 2, reunion tour. You walk outside and stand on a ridge, scanning the horizon. Nothing. Then, something. A dot. A darker dot. Movement. Ship, someone whispers. No one corrects him. The dot grows, becomes structure, becomes reality. Shouts erupt, hats wave. Someone slips and falls dramatically. Joke number 3. You laugh and help him up. The vessel approaches, cutting through ice like a promise, and with it comes mail. Fast mail. Replies. News. Fresh words. Fresh timelines. Soon you will hear voices. Soon you will read letters that are not a year old. Soon, waiting will end. Historians still argue whether reintegration after isolation was harder than the isolation itself. Some explorers reported feeling disoriented by normal life, overwhelmed by speed and noise. Leaving Antarctica was not just departure, it was cultural shock. You watch the ship draw closer. You hold your breath. All those postcards, all those months, all that ink. They're about to complete their journey. And so are you.
You stand on the edge of the ice as the ship finally settles into place, its hull groaning softly like an old animal relieved to rest. Ropes fly, orders echo, boots thud against metal. After months of silence, the world arrives all at once. The smell hits you first. Oil, metal, wet rope, foreignness. Then voices, new voices, different accents, different rhythms. Too fast, too loud. Wonderful! A mainstream historical fact settles in. When relief or return ships reached Antarctic camps, mail was often distributed almost immediately, sometimes right on deck, as soon as bags were unloaded. Officers understood that letters mattered more than formal procedure. You watch as canvas sacks are carried down, heavier now with answers, replies, consequences, time catching up. Someone opens the first bag with trembling hands. Out come envelopes, postcards, new handwriting, new ink, new lives continued without you. A murmur spreads. Names are called, hands rise, paper changes ownership. You hear your name. Your breath catches. You step forward. You receive a bundle. It's thicker than you expected. 3 letters, 2 postcards, all addressed to you, all from different moments in a life you haven't lived for months. You sit down hard on a crate. Careful, someone says. That's historical seating. Joke number 1. You smile weakly and begin. The first letter is practical. News, weather, money, neighborhood gossip. The second is emotional. Longer, messier, more crossings out. The third is short. I'm proud of you. It wrecks you. Quietly. Historians still argue whether the emotional release at expedition endings was more intense than at any other moment of the journey. Some accounts describe tears, laughter, exhaustion, and numbness happening simultaneously. Emotional multitasking at maximum capacity. You look around. Someone is crying openly. Someone is laughing too loudly. Someone is staring at nothing, letter forgotten in their lap. Someone is hugging a mailbag. No one judges. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some explorers reported feeling strangely disappointed when finally receiving mail, because reality could never match months of imagined messages. Anticipation had inflated everything. Truth arrived smaller, but real. You understand. And you're grateful anyway. Another mainstream fact floats in. Many explorers preserved their final outgoing and incoming postcards as personal keepsakes for life, storing them in drawers, albums, or trunks. These papers became anchors to their most extreme memories. Historians still argue whether the emotional release at expedition endings was more intense than at any other moment of the journey. Some accounts describe tears, laughter, exhaustion, and numbness happening simultaneously, emotional multitasking at maximum capacity. You look around. Someone is crying openly. Someone is laughing too loudly. Someone is staring at nothing, letter forgotten in their lap. Someone is hugging a mailbag. No one judges. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some explorers reported feeling strangely disappointed when finally receiving mail, because reality could never match months of imagined messages. Anticipation had inflated everything. Truth arrived smaller, but real. You understand. And you're grateful anyway. Another mainstream fact floats in. Many explorers preserved their final outgoing and incoming postcards as personal keepsakes for life, storing them in drawers, albums, or trunks. These papers became anchors to their most extreme memories. Historians still argue whether nostalgia for polar life intensified over time, reshaping memories into softer versions. Did suffering become romance? Often, yes. You finish reading. You tuck the letters away carefully, not like fragile objects, like living things. The ship prepares for departure. Some will stay, most will go. You will go. You take one last look at the hut, the drying line, the table, the lamp, the place where you learned how much paper can matter. Someone asks, "Ready?" You nod. "Define ready," you reply. Joke number 2. As you walk toward the gangway, you glance back at the ice, at distant penguins, at invisible routes and buried messages. Joke number 3, softly. "I'm going to complain about the weather immediately." No one doubts it. You board. The engines begin to hum. The ice recedes. And the postcards, every one of them, have done their work. They carried you through. They carried you out. They carried you home. The ship moves steadily now, rocking just enough to remind you that motion can be gentle, that change does not always have to arrive as a storm. You lean against the railing, wrapped in a coat that still smells faintly of ice and ink, and you let your eyes rest on the widening water. Behind you, the white world grows smaller. Ahead, warmth waits. But for a moment, you stay here, in between. You think of frozen fingers learning to write again, of penguins inspecting paper with polite indifference, of letters held close to chests in the dark, of storms that delayed everything except hope, of bundles tied with twine and faith. You think of how something as thin as a postcard carried voices across oceans, how it kept hearts connected when nothing else could. The wind is softer now. It brushes your face instead of striking it. Your breathing slows. Your shoulders loosen. You are safe. You are moving forward. And all those words, written in huts, by lamplight, with stubborn hands, are part of you now. They travel with you, in memory, in rhythm, in quiet gratitude. So you close your eyes for a second. You let the engines hum like a lullaby. You let the past settle gently behind you, and you rest. Sweet dreams.